I'm Zachary, I'm 35, and my own brother tried to erase my wedding from existence, thinking he could get away with it. Before I tell you how a single, unexpected phone call during Thanksgiving dinner not only exposed his lies, but also completely shattered the power dynamic my family had lived by for decades. Do me a favor and let me know where you're all watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The drive to my parents' house felt different this year. The autumn leaves in Seattle were a brilliant explosion of red and gold, but I barely noticed them. My hand rested on the gearshift and my my wife, I had to remember that. Amelia placed her hand over mine. Her touch was a small anchor in the storm that was brewing inside me. "You ready for this?" she asked, her voice calm and steady. It was the same voice that had talked me down from 100 different ledges over the past year. I took a deep breath, the air tasting metallic with anxiety. As I'll ever be. We pulled into the familiar driveway, the old oak tree I'd climbed as a kid casting a long shadow over the lawn. Inside, the sounds of Thanksgiving were in full swing. The clatter of pots and pans, the murmur of distant relatives catching up, the blare of the football game on the TV in the living room. It was a symphony of normalcy that felt completely alien to me today. We walked in, and the warmth of the house hit me, smelling of roasted turkey and pumpkin spice. My mother, Eleanor, immediately rushed over, but her eyes, as always, scanned right past me and landed on my younger brother, Leo. "Leo, darling, tell Aunt Carol about your big win at the firm," she chirped, beaming as if he'd just cured a disease. Leo, leaning against the fireplace mantel with a drink in his hand, gave a lazy, confident smile. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the sun around which our family's universe revolved. I was just a distant, forgotten planet. My father, Richard, gave me a brief nod from his armchair, his attention already drifting back to the game. It was the same silent dismissal I'd received my whole life. We found a spot on the couch, Amelia's presence a comforting shield, but Leo's eyes found us. He pushed himself off the mantel and sauntered over, a smirk playing on his lips. Well, look what the cat dragged in," he said, his voice loud enough for the whole room to hear. He gestured vaguely toward Amelia. "Still bringing friends to family dinner, Zach? When are you going to grow up and find someone to settle down with?" A few relatives chuckled awkwardly. My face burned. It was the same old script, the same tired put-down. But today, the script was changing. I felt Amelia squeeze my hand, a silent signal of support. This was it. I stood up slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked directly at Leo, my voice coming out clearer and stronger than I expected. "She's not my friend, Leo." The room quieted slightly. Leo's smirk faltered. I smiled, a real smile, and turned to Amelia. "She's my wife." A fork clattered onto a plate somewhere in the dining room. The football game seemed to fade into the background. My mother's smile froze on her face. My father finally looked up from the TV, his brow furrowed in confusion. "We got married 8 months ago," I said, letting the words hang in the dead, silent air. But to understand the shock and disbelief that filled that room, you have to understand that this wasn't just about a secret wedding. This was about a lifetime of secrets, of lies, and of a deliberate, malicious act of sabotage. And the story of how we got to this moment of confrontation actually started many months before, with a stack of beautifully printed wedding invitations that were never meant to see the light of day. It started long before any wedding invitations were ever printed, of course. The feeling of being invisible in my own family wasn't a sudden event. It was a slow erosion, like water wearing down stone over 35 years. Growing up, I was the quiet one, the studious one. Leo was the star athlete, the charismatic charmer. Our roles were cast early, and the play never changed. I remember my college graduation like it was yesterday. I'd worked my tail off for that environmental science degree, juggling classes and a part-time job. I was the first in our immediate family to get a master's degree. I was proud. I sent my parents the date months in advance, circled it on the family calendar in the kitchen. The day came, a bright, sunny afternoon. I stood there in my cap and gown, scanning the sea of faces in the crowd, looking for them. But their seats were empty. I called them afterward, my stomach twisting into a cold knot. "Oh, Zachary. We are so sorry, honey." My mother's voice chirped over the phone, laced with a casual regret that stung more than anger would have. Leo had his final playoff game today. It went into overtime. You know how important this was for him. We just couldn't miss it. I remember just standing there on the manicured university lawn, the sounds of celebration all around me, feeling completely hollow. My graduation, a once-in-a-lifetime achievement, was less important than one of Leo's dozens of football games. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just said, "Oh, okay. I understand." Because that's what I always did. I understood. My 18th birthday was a similar story. My parents had promised a big backyard barbecue. I'd invited all my friends. The day of the party, just as my friends started to arrive, Leo burst into the house waving a letter. He'd just received an early acceptance into his first-choice college. A good one, I'll admit. Instantly, my birthday party was over. The banner my mom had hung that said, "Happy 18th, Zach," was hastily taken down. My father clapped Leo on the back, beaming, and announced to everyone, "Forget the birthday boy. We're celebrating a future college grad." The cake my mom had baked for me, a simple chocolate one because it was my favorite, suddenly had, "Congratulations, Leo," written on it in clumsy, piped icing. My friends looked at me, confused and sympathetic. I just shrugged, a familiar burn of humiliation creeping up my neck. I spent the rest of my own party watching my brother be celebrated, a supporting actor in a scene that was supposed to be mine. These weren't isolated incidents. They were the pattern of my life. My first car was a decade-old hand-me-down from a cousin. Leo's was brand new, a graduation gift. When I landed my first real job, I got a pat on the back. When Leo got his first internship, my parents threw a dinner party in his honor. Over the years, I just stopped trying. I stopped sharing my successes because they felt small and insignificant next to Leo's. I stopped sharing my struggles because they were met with a dismissive, "Well, you're the smart one. You'll figure it out." I built a life for myself in Seattle, an hour's drive away, which felt like a different continent. I poured myself into my work as an environmental engineer, finding solace and purpose in a world that operated on logic and merit, not favoritism. My family saw me as reliable, independent, and boring, the one who didn't need the attention. They had no idea that their perception was a cage they had built for me. And for the longest time, I didn't realize I was the one holding the key. I was just the quiet son, the forgotten brother, a ghost at their Thanksgiving table. At least until I met Amelia. I met Amelia in the most unremarkable way possible, which in itself felt remarkable to me. It was at a small, independent coffee shop near my office. I was grabbing my usual black coffee, and she was there, sketching in a notebook, completely absorbed. She had this intensity about her, a focused energy that drew me in. I accidentally bumped her table, making her ink pen jump and leave a black streak across her drawing of a building facade. I was mortified, apologizing profusely, offering to buy her a new notebook, a new pen, a new coffee. She just looked up, and instead of being annoyed, she laughed. It was a genuine warm sound that made the entire coffee shop feel brighter. "It's okay," she said, tilting her head as she looked at the streak. "Maybe it's an improvement. A little chaos." We started talking. It turned out she was an architect, and the building she was sketching was her latest project. I told her I was an engineer who specialized in sustainable water systems. Her eyes lit up. She didn't just nod politely. She asked questions. Real questions. About my work, about the challenges, about what I was passionate about. For the first time in a very long time, I felt seen. Our first date was a week later. We walked along the waterfront, and I found myself telling her things I'd never told anyone. I told her about my work, the satisfaction of designing a system that would provide clean water for a community. And then, hesitantly, I told her about my family. I tried to frame it lightly, making jokes about being the spare to the heir. She didn't laugh. She stopped walking and turned to face me, her expression serious. "That's not funny, Zach," she said gently. "That sounds incredibly lonely." A lump formed in my throat. No one had ever validated my feelings like that. They'd always just said, "Oh, that's just how families are," or "You're just being too sensitive." Amelia saw the hurt I'd spent a lifetime trying to hide. With her, I was a different person. I was confident, articulate, and interesting. She celebrated my successes with a genuine excitement that made me feel 10 feet tall. When I was chosen to lead a major new project at my firm, she threw me a surprise party with all our friends. She raised a toast, her voice full of pride, calling me the most brilliant, dedicated man I know. In that moment, surrounded by people who were there for me, I realized how starved I'd been for simple recognition. She was also fiercely protective. The first time she met my family was for a Sunday dinner. She watched the dynamic play out with her sharp, architect's eyes. She saw how my mother interrupted my story to ask Leo about his golf game. She saw how my father's gaze glazed over when I talked about a complex project, only to become animated when Leo mentioned a stock tip. On the drive home, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You know, you don't have to fight for scraps of their attention, Zach. What you have to say is important. You are important." It was with Amelia that I finally felt like I was building a home, not just living in a house. She was my partner, my cheerleader, and my truth-teller. A year and a half after that spilled ink in the coffee shop, I took her back to that same spot. I got down on one knee, my heart pounding, and asked her to be my wife. When she said yes, her eyes shining with tears, I felt a joy so profound it almost hurt. I couldn't wait to build a life with her, a life where we would be the main characters, not supporting cast. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this would be the thing that finally made my family see me. A wedding, a new daughter-in-law, a new chapter. How wrong I was. The sabotage hadn't even begun yet. We decided on a small wedding. Neither of us wanted a huge, ostentatious affair. We wanted something intimate, meaningful, surrounded by the people who truly loved and supported us. We found a beautiful little venue on the coast, a place with huge windows overlooking the Pacific Ocean. We set a date for June. The most important part for me, despite everything, was having my family there. I held onto the stubborn, naive hope that seeing me get married would be a turning point. It was a tangible, undeniable life event. They couldn't overlook this, could they? Amelia, bless her heart, was supportive. She designed the invitations herself. They were beautiful, simple, elegant, with a watercolor image of the coastline where we would say our vows. We spent a weekend addressing them, a stack for her family, a stack for our friends, and a small, hopeful stack for mine. I wrote a personal note in each one for my parents and for Leo. We mailed them out in early April, giving everyone plenty of time to RSVP. And then we waited. The responses started trickling in. Amelia's family was ecstatic. Her parents called us, weeping with joy. Her cousins booked flights immediately. Our friends sent back their RSVPs with excited notes. Our apartment's mailbox became a source of daily joy. But from my side of the family, there was nothing. Just silence. First, I made excuses. The mail is slow. I'd tell Amelia, who would just give me a patient, knowing look, they're probably just busy. After 2 weeks, the anxiety started to gnaw at me. I called my mom. The phone rang and rang, then went to voicemail. I left a message. "Hey Mom, just checking in to see if you guys got the invitation. Hope you're doing well. Talk soon." No call back. I tried my dad a few days later. Straight to voicemail. I left another message. I texted Leo. "Hey, did you get something in the mail from me and Amelia?" The text message showed as delivered. Hours passed. Then a day. Then 2. The status never changed to read. The silence was no longer passive. It felt active, aggressive. It was a suffocating blanket of disregard. Amelia watched me pace our apartment, my phone in my hand, my face a mask of confusion and hurt. Maybe they're angry we didn't tell them we were engaged in person? I theorized, grasping at straws. "You tried to, Zach," she reminded me gently. You called them the night you proposed, and your mom said she was too busy watching her show to talk and to call back later. She was right. I had forgotten that particular sting. The RSVP deadline came and went. Still nothing. The hurt was curdling into a cold, hard anger. This was a new level of dismissiveness, even for them. It wasn't just overlooking an achievement. This was ignoring a fundamental life milestone. The final straw came a week later. I was talking to my aunt on my dad's side, his sister, about an unrelated family matter. I casually asked her, "By the way, did you get an invitation from me for a wedding in June?" There was a pause. "No, dear," she said. "I didn't. Are you getting married?" "That's wonderful. When did all this happen?" My blood ran cold. It wasn't just my parents and Leo. It was my entire side of the family. The invitations hadn't arrived. All of them? How was that possible? That night, an ugly suspicion began to form in my mind. A thought so monstrous I could barely let myself think it. But I knew my family's address. I knew my parents often left their mail on the entryway table for days. And I knew my brother, Leo, still lived at home, rent-free, despite his high-paying job. He would have had access to all of it. But even thinking it felt like a betrayal. Surely he wouldn't. Surely they couldn't. It had to be a massive, unbelievable postal error. That was the only logical explanation. But as I would soon find out, logic had very little to do with it. Our wedding day was beautiful. It was also tinged with a deep, unshakable sadness. We stood under a driftwood arch, the sound of the ocean waves in the background, and exchanged our vows surrounded by Amelia's loving family and our wonderful friends. Every time I looked out at the guests, I couldn't help but see the empty chairs where my family should have been. Amelia squeezed my hand during the ceremony, a silent acknowledgement of the void. She knew. During the reception, her father, Tom, gave a toast. He spoke about how happy he was to welcome me into their family, how he'd seen the joy Amelia and I brought each other. "Zachary," he said, raising his glass to me, "we are so proud to call you our son." I had to fight back tears. It was the validation, the simple, heartfelt acceptance I had craved from my own father my entire life. But the joy of the day couldn't completely erase the mystery and the hurt. When we got back from our short honeymoon, I was a man on a mission. The idea of a massive postal error seemed less and less likely the more I thought about it. I needed answers, not for closure, but for truth. My first stop was the post office. I went back to the exact branch where we had mailed the invitations. I had kept the receipt, a crumpled piece of paper at the bottom of a drawer that now felt like the most important document I owned. I explained the situation to a patient, helpful clerk named Maria. I told her that a large batch of mail, all sent on the same day to different addresses in the same general area, had seemingly vanished. She listened intently, her brow furrowed. "That's highly unusual," she said. "Let me see what I can find." She took my receipt and disappeared into the back. I waited, my foot tapping nervously on the linoleum floor. 10 minutes later, she returned with a printout. "Okay, so the good news is your letters were all processed and sent out for delivery," she said, pointing to a line of code on the paper. "They left this facility on schedule." "So what happened to them?" I asked, my frustration growing. "Well, these were just standard letters, so they don't have individual tracking," she explained. "But you did send one of them via certified mail, right? The one to your parents' address." My heart skipped a beat. Amelia had insisted on it. "Just in case," she'd said. "It's a big announcement. It's worth the extra few dollars for peace of mind." At the time, I thought it was overkill. Now, I realized it might be everything. Maria's fingers flew across her keyboard. "Okay, here we go. Certified letter, number 7015. Delivered on April 12th at 11:42 a.m. And we have a signature confirmation." She turned the monitor toward me. My breath caught in my throat. There, on the screen, was a scanned image of a signature on a digital line. It was messy, a quick scrawl, but it was as familiar to me as my own reflection. It was Leo's. I stared at it, my vision blurring. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't the post office. It was him. He had signed for the letter containing my parents' invitation, and by extension, he had intercepted all of them. The other invitations for my aunts, uncles, and cousins would have arrived in the same bundle of mail that day. He'd taken them all. The clerk, Maria, saw the look on my face. "Is everything all right, sir?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded, a wave of cold fury washing over me. He had done this. He had deliberately, methodically, erased my wedding from my family's reality. He had stolen this moment from me, from Amelia, from all of them. "Can I get a printed copy of that?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "The signature confirmation?" "Of course," she said, her voice soft with sympathy. I walked out of that post office with a single piece of paper in my hand, but it felt as heavy as a slab of concrete. It was undeniable proof of a betrayal so profound, I could barely wrap my mind around it. The question was no longer what happened. The question was why. And what in God's name was I going to do about it? That night, I laid everything out on the dining room table for Amelia. The original post office receipt, the printout of the delivery confirmation, the scanned image of Leo's arrogant signature. She looked at it all, her face hardening. She wasn't surprised, not really. She had suspected something like this all along. She had seen the corrosive envy in Leo's eyes from the first time she met him. "What a pathetic, cowardly thing to do," she said, her voice low and simmering with anger. She was angry for me, and the fierceness of her loyalty was a balm on my raw, wounded soul. "What do we do now?" I asked, slumping into a chair. My mind was a whirlwind of rage and grief. Part of me wanted to drive over to my parents' house right then and there, to throw the evidence in Leo's face and watch him squirm. Another, more tired part of me just wanted to let it go, to cut them all off and never look back. "We don't let him get away with it," Amelia said firmly. She sat down opposite me, her eyes locking onto mine. "This isn't just about the invitations anymore, Zach. This is about your entire life. This is about them treating you like you don't matter. If you let this go, you're telling them that it's okay, that they can keep doing it forever." She was right. This was a line in the sand. This was the moment where I either stood up for myself, for my marriage, for my own worth, or I accepted my role as the family ghost for the rest of my life. "So I confront him?" I asked. "What good will that do? My parents will take his side. They always do. It will be his word against mine." "Not this time," she said, tapping the printout with the signature. "This time you have proof. Undeniable proof. And you don't do it in private where they can twist the story and gaslight you later. You do it in the open." We talked for hours, long into the night. We weighed every option. A family meeting? A letter? In the end, we kept coming back to the same conclusion. A public reckoning was the only way to break the cycle. A private conversation would be too easy for them to dismiss, to manipulate. They needed to be confronted with the truth in a setting where they couldn't just sweep it under the rug. And then, as if on cue, the universe provided the perfect stage. A week later, my mother called. Her voice was cheerful, completely oblivious, as if months of silence hadn't passed between us. "Zachary, I was just thinking, we haven't seen you in ages. You have to come for Thanksgiving this year. The whole family will be here. It'll be wonderful." I held the phone, my knuckles white. The audacity was breathtaking. After ignoring my calls, my texts, and my wedding, she was acting like nothing had happened. Amelia, who was listening on speakerphone, gave me a sharp, decisive nod. This was our chance. "Sure, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "We'll be there. Amelia and I wouldn't miss it for the world." "Oh, lovely," she chirped. "Leo will be so pleased to see you." I bet he will, I thought, a bitter taste in my mouth. After I hung up, Amelia and I looked at each other. The plan was set. It was a terrifying, audacious plan. We would walk into that Thanksgiving dinner, play along, and wait for the perfect moment. We weren't going there for a fight. We were going there for a verdict. I would be the prosecution, and that piece of paper with Leo's signature would be my star witness. For the next few weeks, I prepared. I put the original receipt and the delivery confirmation into a crisp manila folder. I felt like a lawyer preparing for the most important case of his life. My own. I was no longer just sad or hurt. I was focused. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to their dysfunction. I was about to confront it head-on. Thanksgiving was coming. And with it, a long overdue day of reckoning. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving were some of the longest of my life. A strange calm settled over me, the kind you hear about people feeling in the eye of a hurricane. The decision had been made. The confrontation was inevitable. All that was left was to wait for the storm to hit. I went to work. I led my team meetings. I reviewed schematics for a new water reclamation project. On the surface, everything was normal. But underneath, there was a current of humming, nervous energy. I would find myself staring out my office window, replaying the impending conversation in my head, practicing the words I would say. Amelia was my rock. She never once questioned our decision. She was the one who suggested I gather more than just the signature. Don't give them any wiggle room, she'd said, her mind sharp and strategic. Think of every possible excuse they could make and dismantle it before they even have a chance to speak. So I did. I called my phone company. I sat on hold for 20 minutes, listening to tinny hold music, before finally getting a representative on the line. I explained that I suspected my number had been blocked by my parents' landline and cell phones. After confirming my identity through a dozen security questions, the representative put me on a brief hold. He came back on the line a few minutes later. Yes, sir. I can confirm that your number was manually blocked from both lines associated with this account on April 10th. April 10th. 2 days before the invitations were delivered. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act of jealousy from Leo. This was premeditated. He, or someone, had deliberately cut off my main lines of communication before the invitations even arrived. It was a coordinated effort to ensure my complete isolation. I asked the representative if he could email me a confirmation of this for my records. He agreed. I printed it out and added it to the folder. The folder became a talisman of sorts. It sat on my desk at home, a stark, manila-colored promise of the truth. Inside was the post office receipt, the certified mail confirmation with Leo's signature, and now the email from the phone company. It was a damning collection of facts, a narrative of betrayal told through bureaucratic paperwork. The night before Thanksgiving, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the what-ifs swirling in my mind. What if I was wrong? What if there was some bizarre, convoluted explanation for all of this? But deep down, I knew there wasn't. The facts were too clean, the pattern too familiar. What if I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of my family and I'd be the one left standing alone in the rubble? The fear of losing them, as toxic as they were, was still a primal fear, buried deep in my DNA. I must have been tossing and turning, because Amelia stirred beside me. "You're thinking too loud," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "I'm scared," I admitted into the darkness. "Scared that I'm about to break my family for good." She rolled over to face me, her hand finding mine in the dark. "They broke it, Zach," she said softly but firmly. "A long time ago. You're not breaking it. You're just turning on the lights so everyone can finally see the damage." Her words cut through the fear. She was right. I wasn't the villain here. I was the one holding the lamp, about to illuminate a rot that had been festering in the dark for years. The next morning, as we got ready to leave, I called her parents. I told her father, Tom, what we were about to do. I didn't want them to be blindsided if they heard about the fallout later. His response solidified my resolve. "Son," he said, his voice steady and strong, "you are doing the right thing. You deserve to be treated with respect. Whatever happens, you and Amelia have a family here with us. Always. We've got your back." I hung up the phone, a profound sense of gratitude washing over me. He was right. I already had a family. A real one. One that was chosen, not just assigned by blood. I picked up the manila folder from the desk and slid it into my satchel. It was time to go. The storm was here. We're back at the Thanksgiving table. The air is thick with unspoken questions. My declaration? She's my wife. is still hanging over the room like a physical object. My mother is the first to find her voice, a nervous, high-pitched laugh escaping her lips. "Zachary, don't be ridiculous. This isn't funny. What kind of joke is this?" "It's not a joke, Mom," I said, my voice even. "We were married on June 14th. My father finally spoke, his voice gruff with confusion. "Married? Without telling us? Without inviting us? What on earth are you talking about?" "Oh, we invited you," I said, and with that, I reached into my satchel that was resting by my chair. I pulled out the manila folder and placed it on the table with a soft but definitive thud. The room fell silent again. Everyone's eyes were on the folder. It was a foreign object in the landscape of turkey and cranberry sauce, an intrusion of hard reality into their carefully constructed holiday bubble. "We invited all of you," I repeated, my gaze sweeping across the room, past my stunned aunts and uncles, and landing squarely on my brother. Leo was trying to look bored, nonchalant, but a tiny muscle was twitching in his jaw. He knew what was coming. I opened the folder. "I have here," I began, my voice taking on the cadence of a formal presentation, "the receipt from the Seattle downtown post office, dated April 8th, for 23 invitations sent to various addresses belonging to our family." I slid the paper across the table. "I also have," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "the delivery confirmation for the certified letter sent to this address. It confirms the letter was delivered on April 12th at 11:42 in the morning." I placed this document next to the first. My mother picked up the paper, squinting at it. "This doesn't prove anything. We never saw it. The post office must have lost it." "That's where it gets interesting," I said, my eyes still locked on Leo. "Because a certified letter requires a signature from someone at the residence, confirming they received it." I pulled out the final, damning piece of paper, the one I had been waiting to reveal. I slid it directly in front of Leo, whose face had gone pale. "Is this your signature, Leo?" I asked, my voice ringing with clarity in the silent room. He stared at the paper. His own name, in his own handwriting, stared back at him. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. My father snatched the paper from him. He stared at it, then looked at Leo, then back at the paper. "Leo, what is this?" "It was junk mail," Leo finally sputtered, his voice cracking. "I thought it was a credit card offer or something. How was I supposed to know?" "It was a thick, cream-colored envelope," Amelia interjected, her voice sharp as glass. "It looked nothing like junk mail." "And what about the other 22 invitations that also mysteriously disappeared? Did you think they were all junk mail, too?" The color drained completely from Leo's face. He was cornered. He looked to my mother, his eyes wide with panic, his usual go-to for a rescue. For a second, I thought she would do it. I saw the maternal instinct flicker in her eyes, the urge to protect her favored son at all costs. But the evidence was too stark, the public setting too exposing. "Leo," she whispered, her voice trembling, Did you take them?" He finally broke. He slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. "Fine. Yes, I took them. Are you happy now?" He snarled, his face contorted in an ugly sneer. He wasn't looking at our parents. He was looking at me. "It was supposed to be my year," he yelled, spit flying from his lips. "My engagement, my wedding. For once, I was supposed to be the center of attention without you swooping in and trying to steal my thunder." The room was in stunned silence, the sheer, naked jealousy of his confession hanging in the air. "Steal your thunder?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "My wedding had nothing to do with you, Leo. We set a date that worked for us. But it was too late for reason." He was unraveling. And in that moment, just as the chaos reached its peak, my phone, which I had placed face up on the table, began to ring. The ringtone cut through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. It was a generic, professional chime, but in the suffocating silence of the room, it sounded like a fire alarm. Everyone's head snapped toward the phone. The screen lit up with a name, Mr. Harrison. My heart hammered in my chest. Mr. Harrison was my company's CEO, a man I deeply respected but rarely spoke to directly. Why on earth was he calling me on Thanksgiving Day? I looked at Amelia, a silent question in my eyes. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips as she gave a slight nod. My mind raced. She knew. She had something to do with this. My hand was shaking slightly as I reached for the phone. I answered it and, without a second thought, pressed the speakerphone button. The acoustics in the dining room were good. His voice would carry. "Zachary, my apologies for calling you on a holiday." A booming, cheerful voice filled the room. It was unmistakably Mr. Harrison. "I just got off a final call with the board, and I couldn't wait to tell you myself." I could feel every eye in the room on me. My parents looked utterly bewildered. Leo just stared, his mouth slightly agape, his earlier rage momentarily forgotten. "Sir," I managed to say, my throat dry, "the board has unanimously approved the promotion, son." Mr. Harrison's voice was full of genuine enthusiasm. "Congratulations. You are officially our new Director of Strategic Projects for the entire West Coast. We were blown away by your proposal for the desalination initiative. Absolutely brilliant. Director." The word hung in the air, seeming to shimmer. It was a massive leap, a position that came with immense responsibility and, as I knew from the offer I had been negotiating, a substantial increase in salary that would dwarf anything Leo was making. It was a level of success I had kept to myself, not wanting to give them another thing to ignore or belittle. "Thank you, sir," I stammered. "I'm honored." "The honor is ours, Zachary. You've earned it," he boomed. And then, he delivered the final, devastating blow, completely unaware of the drama he had just interrupted. "Listen, the real reason I'm calling on a holiday is because my wife just spoke to yours. Amelia mentioned you two had a tough time organizing your wedding this past summer without much family support. I just wanted to say that's a real shame, but it shows what a strong team you are. You're a lucky man to have a woman like that by your side, Zachary. Family isn't always about blood, you know. It's about the people who show up for you." Silence. Absolute, deafening, soul-crushing silence. In 30 seconds, a complete stranger had done what I had failed to do in 35 years. He had validated my success, my marriage, and my worth, all in one fell swoop. He had laid the truth bare on the Thanksgiving table for everyone to see. Mr. Harrison, oblivious, continued. "Anyway, we'll sort out the paperwork for your new salary and the company car on Monday. You have a wonderful Thanksgiving with your lovely wife." "Thank you, sir. You too," I said mechanically. He hung up. The click of the call ending echoed in the room. I looked around. My father's face was ashen. He was staring at me as if he'd never seen me before. My mother's hand was over her mouth, her eyes wide with a horrified understanding. They hadn't just missed a wedding. They had been completely, utterly blind to who their son had become. But the best part, the part one will savor for the rest of my life, was the look on Leo's face. The smugness, the anger, the jealousy. It was all gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. He looked small, insignificant. For the first time in his life, the golden child had been completely and utterly eclipsed. The power dynamic in that room hadn't just shifted. It had been annihilated. This is the moment that changed everything, the moment I finally took back control of my own life's narrative. Thank you so much for sticking with me this far. You guys are amazing. If you could, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below, just so I know you've been here with me on this journey. It doesn't just help more people find this story. It lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is honestly the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of my story. Slowly, deliberately, I stood up. Amelia stood with me. I didn't look at anyone else. I just folded my evidence, slid it back into the manila folder, and placed it in my satchel. The actions were small, mundane, but they felt momentous. It was the closing of a case, the end of an era. "I think we'll be going now," I said to the room at large. My voice was calm, devoid of the anger and hurt that had been my constant companions. All I felt was a vast, quiet emptiness. No one tried to stop us. What could they say? My father opened his mouth, then closed it again, looking utterly lost. My mother just stared, tears silently streaming down her face. Leo wouldn't even look at me. We walked out of the dining room, through the living room where the football game was still playing to an empty audience, and out the front door. The cool November air hit my face, and I took a deep, shuddering breath. Felt like the first real breath I'd taken all day. The drive home was silent. It wasn't an angry silence or an awkward one. It was a silence of profound, shared understanding. Amelia reached over and took my hand, her fingers lacing through mine. There was nothing to say. She had been there. She had seen it all. When we walked into our quiet, peaceful apartment, it felt more like a sanctuary than ever before. It was our space, a place we had built together, free from the toxic dynamics and invisible hierarchies of my past. As soon as the door closed behind us, the adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins for hours finally dissipated, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. And then, to my own surprise, tears started to well up in my eyes. They weren't tears of sadness, not really. They were tears of release. A lifetime of being minimized, of being ignored, of feeling second best, came pouring out of me in silent, hot streaks down my face. It was the grief for the family I wished I'd had, the acceptance I'd never received. Amelia didn't say a word. She just wrapped her arms around me and held me. She let me cry it all out, her embrace a fortress of safety and unconditional love. In that moment, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that I had everything I would ever need right there in my arms. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my father. "We need to talk. Call me." It was a demand, not a request. The old me would have called back immediately, desperate for the conversation, ready to smooth things over. But the old me had walked out of that house and wasn't coming back. I showed the text to Amelia. She read it and looked at me, her eyebrows raised, waiting to see what I would do. I took a breath and typed back a short, simple reply. "No, I need space. Don't contact me until I'm ready." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. I was setting a boundary, maybe for the first time in my entire life. Felt terrifying, felt powerful, felt right. I turned my phone off and put it in a drawer. For the first time, I was in control of the conversation. And for now, the conversation was over. The 6 months that followed were like waking up from a long, feverish dream. The silence from my family was absolute. And in that silence, my own life became louder, more vibrant, more real. The promotion at work was everything Mr. Harrison had promised and more. I dove into the new role, leading a team of brilliant engineers on a project that felt genuinely important. For the first time, my work wasn't an escape. It was a source of deep, personal fulfillment. My new salary was a game changer, allowing us to start seriously planning for the future, talking about buying a house, a real home of our own. We weren't just dreaming anymore, we were building. Life with Amelia was a quiet joy. We spent our weekends hiking in the Cascades, exploring the city, and hosting small dinner parties for our friends. We had long, rambling conversations over glasses of wine, talking about everything and nothing. It was easy. It was peaceful. And our bond with her family grew even stronger. We had dinner with them at least once a week. Her father, Tom, would ask me about work, his eyes full of genuine interest and pride. Her mother, Sarah, treated me like the son she'd always wanted, always making sure to cook my favorite dessert. They included us, celebrated us, and loved us without condition or agenda. They showed me what family was supposed to feel like. The first crack in the silence from my side of the family came about 2 months after Thanksgiving. A call from my father. I saw his name on the screen and my stomach clenched, but I answered, knowing I couldn't avoid it forever. The conversation was stilted, awkward. He didn't apologize, not really. He talked around the issue, using vague phrases like, "things got out of hand," and "a lot of misunderstanding." He mostly talked about himself. How hard it had been, how shocked he was. It was a classic non-apology, an attempt to get me to soothe his discomfort. Dad? I said, cutting him off, my voice polite but firm. I'm not interested in discussing how you feel about what happened. I'm only interested in hearing you acknowledge what happened and the role you all played in it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Well, he finally said, sounding flustered, it's just complicated. It's actually very simple, I replied. I'm going to go now. We can talk again when you've had more time to think. I ended the call. It wasn't angry, it wasn't emotional. It was just a boundary. This is what I need from you. If you can't provide it, the conversation is over. The most shocking development came a month after that. An email appeared in my inbox with the subject line, I am sorry. It was from Leo. I almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, my guard up, expecting more excuses and blame. But that's not what it was. It was a long, rambling, but shockingly honest email. He wrote that the humiliation of that Thanksgiving had forced him to take a hard look at himself. He admitted that he'd been jealous of me his entire life, not of my successes, but of what he called my quiet confidence. My ability to be happy without needing constant external validation. He confessed that when he saw the wedding invitation, something in him had snapped. He couldn't stand the thought of me having this perfect, happy life with a wonderful woman while he was still struggling in a relationship he wasn't even sure about. He wrote, I know this doesn't fix anything. I know it was a monstrous thing to do. I started seeing a therapist a few weeks ago. She says I have a lot of work to do on my insecurities and my need for attention. She's right. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong. Not because I got caught, but because it was just wrong. I read the email 3 times. It was the most honest, self-aware thing I had ever heard from my brother. It didn't erase the years of pain, but it was a start. It was a crack of light in a door that I thought was sealed shut forever. I didn't reply. It was too soon. But I didn't delete the email either. The true test came about 8 months after the infamous Thanksgiving. The phone rang, and it was my father. His voice was strained, panicked. Zachary, it's your mother. She fell. She was getting out of the shower, and she slipped. She's broken her hip. My heart sank. Despite everything, she was still my mother. Is she okay? Where is she? She's at St. Joseph's. She needs surgery, he said, his voice cracking. I don't know what to do. The doctors are talking about recovery, physical therapy. I can't handle all this on my own. He didn't explicitly ask me to come, but the plea was hanging in the air. For a moment, the old Zachary resurfaced. The dutiful son, the fixer, the one who would drop everything and rush to the rescue, hoping this time, his efforts would be appreciated. I told my dad I'd call him back. I hung up and immediately told Amelia what had happened. What do you want to do? She asked, her expression unreadable. She would support me either way, I knew that. I don't know, I said honestly, pacing the living room. Part of me wants to say, this is your problem, you deal with it. But another part, she's my mom. I can't just abandon her when she's hurt and scared. Then don't, Amelia said simply. But if you go back, you don't go back as the forgotten son. You go back as Zachary, the man who is her son, yes, but who is also my husband. You go back with boundaries. Her words clarified everything. This wasn't about forgiveness or forgetting. It was about showing up with compassion, but on my own terms. I drove up the next day. The atmosphere in the hospital room was thick with unspoken emotions. My mother looked small and frail in the hospital bed, her face pale. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears of what looked like genuine relief and regret. I stayed for a week. I helped my father navigate the labyrinth of hospital bureaucracy. I talked to doctors about post-op care. I made sure my mom had everything she needed, but I maintained a polite, professional distance. I was there to help, not to be absorbed back into the old dynamic. I stayed at a hotel, not at the house. I had dinner with them at the hospital, but then I went back to my own space. Leo was there too. He was quiet, subdued. He did his part, running errands and sitting with our mom. He and I barely spoke, but the animosity was gone, replaced by a kind of awkward, fragile truce. On my last day, as I was sitting with my mother alone in her room, she reached for my hand. "Thank you for coming, Zachary," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. It means more than you know." "You're my mom," I said simply. Of course I came. I thought for a moment that we were having a breakthrough, that maybe this crisis had finally broken through her defenses. And then, she proved me wrong. "Zachary," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I was talking to Leo. Things at his firm have been difficult since the merger. He's not happy." I stiffened, a feeling of dread washing over me. I knew where this was going. "With your big new promotion," she continued, a hopeful gleam in her eye. "I was just wondering, does your company have any positions for someone with his financial background? Maybe you could put in a good word for him. It would mean so much to him, to us." And there it was, the final test. The old me would have caved. The old me would have seen it as a chance to finally earn her love, to be the savior. But the man sitting by her bed was not the old me. I gently pulled my hand away. I looked her directly in the eye, my voice soft but unyielding. "No, Mom," I said. "I can't do that. Leo needs to find his own way. And my job is not a tool to fix our family's problems." I paused, letting the words sink in. And for what it's worth, trying to leverage my success to his advantage after he actively tried to sabotage my happiness is incredibly inappropriate. "I'm here because you are my mother and you are hurt. Let's not make it about anything else." Her face fell. The hopeful gleam was replaced by a flash of her old indignation. But it quickly faded, leaving behind a tired resignation. She knew she had crossed a line. She had tried one last time to pull me back into the old game, and I had refused to play. "I see," she said quietly, looking away. In that moment, I knew I was truly free. My helping her wasn't a transaction for her approval. Her inability to see that didn't diminish my act of compassion. I had set my final boundary, not with anger, but with a calm, quiet clarity. I could love my mother, I could help her in a crisis, but I would never again sacrifice my own well-being for her approval. It's been a year since that day in the hospital, and almost 2 years since that fateful Thanksgiving. Amelia and I bought a house. It's a modest place with a big backyard and enough room for a garden, which has become my weekend obsession. There's something therapeutic about digging in the dirt, planting seeds, and watching things grow. It's a quiet, hopeful act. My relationship with my family is a work in progress. It's not the fairy tale ending you see in movies, where everyone has a tearful reunion and all is forgiven. It's more complicated, more real than that. I talk to my parents on the phone every couple of weeks. The conversations are often superficial: the weather, my work, their health. My mother never tried to ask for a favor like that again. There's a new, fragile respect in her tone, a recognition that I am no longer the son she thought she knew. My father, in his own way, is trying. He asks about Amelia. He tells me he's proud of me. It's awkward and late, but it's something. Leo and I have started to tentatively rebuild. He's still in therapy. He switched jobs and seems happier, less driven by the need to compete. We met for coffee a few months ago. It was the first time we'd really talked, just the two of us, since everything blew up. He apologized again, face to face this time. He told me he understands if I can never fully trust him again. I told him I appreciated that. There's no deep brotherly bond. Not yet. Maybe there never will be. But there's a possibility, a path forward that isn't paved with resentment. We are two adults cautiously learning how to be brothers. But my real family, my true north, is the one I come home to every night. It's Amelia, laughing as we try to cook a new recipe and inevitably mess it up. It's her parents, who show up on a Saturday with a new plant for our garden. No occasion necessary. It's the friends who fill our home with laughter and support. I've learned that family isn't just about the blood you share. It's about the people who show up. The people who see you, who celebrate you, and who hold you up when you can't stand on your own. For the longest time, I thought I needed my parents' and brothers' approval to feel whole. But I realized that seeking water from an empty well will only leave you thirsty. My life isn't perfect. The scars are still there. But they don't hurt anymore. They're just a reminder of the battle I fought and won for my own self-worth. Standing here in my own backyard, with the sun on my face and my wife's hand in mine, I don't feel like the forgotten son anymore. I feel like me, Zachary, a husband, a director, a gardener, a man who finally found his way home. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to completely redraw the boundaries with the people you love? I'd be honored to hear about your experiences. Please, share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.